Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Kate. I'm a marketing assistant at Linen Press. And I'm really excited to welcome you to the first in our brand new series of author talks, which we have called Inside the Linen Cupboard. Linen Press was founded by Lynn Mitchell around 16 years ago. And as far as we're aware, we are still the only UK-wide independent women's press. We publish mainly literary fiction and life writing of exceptional quality. We set the bar high here at Linen Press. And one of our brilliant writers, Avril Joy, who has published 3 books so far with Linen Press, is here tonight to kick off this series of talks. Avril began writing after working for 25 years in a women's prison, and since then has scooped many awards, including the Costa Short Story Award in 2012 and the People's Book Prize in 2017. Avril will be speaking about her experience of women's containment and how her work in prison has shaped her writing. And we'll also hear some short readings from her books, including from her forthcoming novel, A Little Madness in the Spring, which will be published by Linen Press in September 2023. At the end of Avril's talk, we will also have a short audience Q&A. So please feel free to send your messages, to write them in the chat at any time. I'll be keeping a close eye on it, and I'll pick out some to ask Avril at the end. So just before I hand you over, just one final reminder to please ensure that your microphones are on mute, just to avoid any disturbance. And yeah, without any further ado, welcome Avril. I'll hand you over.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Yeah, hi, thank you everyone for being here. Thanks, Kate, for hosting, and thanks to Rawa for organising it all. Yeah, Kate has kind of said what I'm going to be talking about this evening, and it is quite a big brief, so I'm just going to crack on because time's quite limited. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this work I've done with women in prison, really, and how it shaped my writing, and also about the new novel. Before I start, I just want to say that it's not really possible to talk about women in prison without mentioning abuse. And although I'm not going to talk about abuse in any kind of detail, I just want to let people know in case that could be a trigger for them. So, Low Newton Women's Prison. I started working there in the mid-80s, showing my age here. And in those early days when I first worked there, I was just a lowly part-time teacher. I worked on a small female wing of maximum of about 25 prisoners. In those days, very few women were really in prison, and those who were mainly sex workers and shoplifters. The main part of the jail was reserved for young men under 21 who were in prison. So it was this small unit just for women. And I came and went through the prison and to that unit, but without keys. I mean, I was just a lowly person, and I wasn't, so I wasn't allowed to have keys. And if anybody who's ever been in a prison will know, or you will have seen pictures also on the TV, documentaries or whatever. I mean, prison really comprises a series of locked gates. So without keys, you're rendered powerless. You're almost, how the prisoners feel, actually. And you just have to hang around at gates and wait for someone to let you in. So just getting to my classroom was a challenge. And I thought I'd read something. I'm going to talk a bit more about the earlier days of my work there, because they were so formative for me, I think, and feed so much into my writing. So I'm just going to read a short poem from my collection, Going In With Flowers, which is about the prison, which is just a quiet poem, really, a quiet narrative poem, in some ways a bit different from some of the others, but I think it distills what that experience of going in to the prison was like for me. Its title is What I Know. Every afternoon I cross the yard to gates, locked doors, press the bell and wait without keys, not knowing for how long. What I already know, this, me, I am not a priority. If the bell is answered, it will most likely be by chance. To press twice is severely frowned on. Whenever the gate is opened, I will smile as if I mean it big time. And I will be greeted like an unwanted salesman on a job creation scheme, selling dusters and dishcloths. It will be my smile that gets me in. They consider me harmless. I am a hypocrite. Hypocrisy, my survival. I will go to the PO's office to collect the classroom cupboard keys and talk about holidays, caravans, nails. Only later, much later, will she tell me how her husband left her. She will smoke and smile like an assassin. Without fail, an officer will find a way to tell me theirs is the worst of all worlds. Without fail, someone will call the prisoners little liars, little shits, scumbags. It is only a short walk from the PO's office to A Wing, if the gates are unlocked. The wing will smell of fags and bleach. The cell doors are blue. Someone will be on her bell, being ignored. In the SO's office, they will be drinking tea. Somewhere, an officer will be shouting at a spy flap, winding a prisoner up. If I were braver, I would call it all out. If I were braver, I'd be locked out. You are waiting in our classroom, no bigger than a cupboard. When I get there, it will feel like home. I think that last line, when I get there, it will feel like home. For me, I felt in those days going into this dark, small, claustrophobic place that lacked compassion and care, where it was staffed entirely by women. And I'm sorry to say they were often quite cruel with the prisoners. Going into this place, the place where I felt most at home was with the prisoners, and in that tiny cupboard-like classroom. And I think I probably should just say, talking about that poem and going in with flowers, I think if you want to know more about that interior life, of what it's really like to live and work in a total institution and the people, you know, who are part of it, then hopefully going in with flowers distills that experience. So there I am, hypocrite, standing at the door, smiling at the madness and nails and whatever. But gradually over time, I like to think, becoming quietly subversive. Because, and quietly is the operative word here, because as long as you kept the women quiet, then nobody cared a jot what you did. There was no syllabus, there was no inspection framework. And so pretty quickly I realized I could do whatever I wanted to do in that classroom with that tiny, you know, 8 women, 10, it would be overcrowded. And so we did all the things that I like to do. So we read poetry and we wrote poetry, and we read and wrote stories. We drew, we collaged, we sang sometimes, we did projects, watched films. I suppose really what we did was lots of creative things. And alongside of that, you know, I did teach some basic maths and English. Now, to do well, most of those things, not any of those things, but most of those things, you need a pen and a piece of paper. But in those days, unaccounted for paper, if you can imagine such a thing as unaccounted for paper, was forbidden. It was banned, and every page in every exercise book had to be numbered. And there was a prisoner who sat in the dining hall with piles of exercise books doing just that, numbering pages. And I think that was possibly the one thing above all that I couldn't countenance. I could not accept that these women who, I mean, let's remember, at this time, there was no in-cell television. There were no phone calls. These women were much more isolated from the outside world, much more cut off from their families, their children. And they had none of these distractions in their cell. And to deny them paper and pen seemed to me to be, well, it just seemed to me to be a basic human right. And so I started giving out paper and exercise books. And I mean, nothing ever happened, actually. So it was one of those crazy rules that were meaningless, I guess. And people would come to my classroom door and, you know, say, Miss, have you got, can I get some paper? Can I get a book? Can I get a pen? You know, it's almost like being in the third world, actually. And so I give this out, and the women would take the exercise books away, and invariably, without any prompting from me, they would write their life stories. I mean, I think a lot of that was because, I mean, they were in extremis, really. They were, you know, here they were in prison. How had they ended there? You know, how had this, you know, trauma come about? And so, and once they wrote them, they would bring them back to me and say, oh, here you are, miss, you know, do you want to read this? And of course, I'm sure you can imagine some of these life stories, most of these life stories were absolutely harrowing to read. But as I read them, I learned so much about the lives of the women that I was working with. I mean, all these familiar patterns emerged, which, you know, the patterns of abuse, particularly in childhood, sexual abuse, which wasn't really acknowledged then, you know, coming up again and again, domestically violent relationships, rape, drug addiction, mental health problems, you know, totally chaotic childhoods and chaotic lives. And so I very quickly learned two things: that these women were really victims of crime themselves, and that sadly most of them were there at the hands of men. So through their life stories, I think I probably learned everything that's in Going In With Us. Yeah, we did have conversations in the classroom, of course we did, but when people write, there's a depth to it. They tell you things that they're not going to reveal in just conversation. I think it's all of that that made me begin to think much more politically about, or much more about the politics of locking women up. Something I try to speak out about on lots of occasions and write about, and something that makes me feel very sad now that we seem to have really not made much progress in that direction. We still lock up women who we simply shouldn't. When I left there, I couldn't think about the prison for a while, and I certainly couldn't think, and still can't think, about fictionalizing that place. And I couldn't also really think about writing memoir, but I knew I wanted to write something, and ultimately that something was this collection of poetry, which is also accompanied by 6 short prose essays. And I think it was just a kind of Emily Dickinson thing, coming at the subject slant, coming at it from a different way, allowed me to say what I wanted to say about those 25 years. But of course, they never leave me. Prison, there were lots of very difficult things and lots of pain and heartache, but there were good things too. And on a personal level, prison was really transformative for me, because in prison I started to write. So in the late 90s, I'm still there, I'm still teaching, I'm teaching a bit more. We've got a bit of a bigger classroom. The wing is now bursting at the seams with women, because heroin and crack cocaine have reached the streets of the Northeast, and the female population, this is in the late 90s, are sort of quadrupled within a year. And we had women locked up all day long with, you know, no outlet, nothing to do. And so the governor at that time appointed a writer in residence, and that to kind of, you know, to offer something else to the women. And that writer in residence was Wendy Robertson, the writer Wendy Robertson. And Wendy and I became friends very, very quickly. And it was Wendy who told me she thought I was a writer, although I had no thoughts. I honestly had no thoughts of ever being a writer, although I'd written when I was young. But she set me off on that path, and I wrote my first novel, The Sweet Track, while I was still working in the prison. So it was transformative for me in that sense. And when just after the time when Wendy came, because of this huge population explosion, the prison in 2000 re-rolled and became a prison for women, and the men were moved out. And at that time, I became part of a team who wanted very much to create a new and better regime for women, with more education and more activities. And hopefully we succeeded in doing that. You know, it doesn't do away with all the issues and difficulties and pain and self-harm and all these other things, but at least we were offering the women opportunities and hoping that they might be transformative. And I think it's impossible to know how much there were. So many women come back again and again into prison, particularly from, you know, women who are addicted to heroin. One way, though, in which I know for sure that prison is, or that was transformative in the work I did in prison, that was in teaching women to read. And not many women actually come into prison unable to read. It's much more of an issue in male prisons. But when they do, and if they're with you long enough and you can teach them to read, it is life-changing, I have no doubt. And I've met women since who have told me that it has changed their life. And I think that theme, the kind of empowerment of learning, and the women alone knew, you know, they had such a thirst for education. They knew they'd missed out, even if they could read and so on. They wanted more. And that thirst for learning and that empowerment that comes with reading and literacy is the theme in my novel, Sometimes a River Song, which was my first published work after coming out of prison. My protagonist, Ayana, she could just as easily be one of my women in prison. She lives with an abusive father and a negligent mother and her siblings on a houseboat in the White River. They're a poor white family who live on a river in Arkansas in the 1930s. And Ayana hasn't been to school. She's been forbidden from going to school, but she really longs to learn to read. That is her struggle. She instinctively knows that this will be her survival. And I think if she is anything, Ayana is such a survivor. And that, I think she is what the women at Love Newton taught me about surviving against all the odds often. So I'd like to read you just a tiny bit from Sometimes a River Song. This is the story is told in Ayana's voice, first person. And she is lying in bed with her sister Hetty. Her sister is older than her. Her sister has been to school. And they're talking about the word barbaric, actually. And she wants to know, Ayana wants to know what the letters look like. And she asks Hetty to write it for her. And Hetty writes the letters down. And this is what Ayana says. It looked like a fine word to me. It looks strong, like a word I need to know. I got to learn how to read, Hetty. I got to learn before it's too late. I am as fierce as you when it comes to reading. I know it's going to be my future. Have to be. It's like my breath. Without it, I die. I'm fixing to learn, no matter what it take. Only I cannot see a way. Cannot see how I'm going to learn if you ain't helping me. You got it, Hetty. She turned to me, and now see she looking hard in my eyes, looking to see if I mean what I say. Please, I ain't gonna be the one who look at the sign in the store, or the catalogue, or the poster they nail on the fence post in the cottonwoods, telling of the preachers, the shows, what come and what about to happen. I ain't going to be the one who see them, who see a whole library full of books just waiting to be opened and not know what they say. You got to help me. You my only hope, Hetty, and I got to start now tonight. First thing you got to tell me what they call the letters when they all put together. I hear the twins saying them over like they be the words to a song, sound like the dancing string on a paper kite. Call it the alphabet, says Hetty. Then you got to teach me the alphabet, Hetty. Please, I'm begging you. I wash your clothes, iron your dress before you go dancing. Put your hair in rags. I'll do anything. Give you everything I got. One letter each night. Start now. I got paper. I've been hiding under the bed. Got a pencil too. I climb out of the bed and reach under and bring up a flour sack and take out the old notebook I found on the roadside a month back. It got pages torn and missing, but it's still paper. So back to paper again. And actually, in putting this talk together and thinking about it this evening, that I kind of realized that pen and paper and the power of the written word and writing come back again and again into my writing, and that goes right back to my earliest days, as I've explained at No Newton, and what Wendy Robertson, our writer in residence, called, because it was still a bit the case when she was there, she called it the famine of paper. And so the paper famine has also found its way into my new novel, Little Madness in the Spring. When I began this novel, I did a lot of research, because as you have to if you're writing a historical novel, and I felt I needed to know everything about the big age of Victorian asylum building. But the more research I did and still do, the more convinced I became of the likeness between the asylum, even as it was then, and the prison. And somehow I instinctively can find my way around this asylum that I've created. I know the women who are its patients. I know its officers. I know its managers, because I've been a part of all of that at No Newton. And so I'm back writing about women who are incarcerated at the hands of men, and living in this total closed institution, which does have therapeutic aims. The Victorians certainly had therapeutic aims. They called it the moral treatment, work, activity, pleasant surroundings. So very much like what we were still trying to achieve in the prison. So I'm back there, but of course, even though it has therapeutic aims, it is still a prison. And I'm back with paper and pen, as you will see. So in my new novel, I have three women, main voices anyway, of three women. I have Simone Gastrell, whose husband has incarcerated her in prison. I have Phoebe Baines, a young girl who has been the subject of much abuse and has really lost touch with reality. Her text appears on the right-hand side of the page and is written in a more poetic style. And I have Alice Semple, who's been in the institution for 14 years, and in my fictional world was once a lover of the poet John Clare. I mean, he had lots of lovers, so yeah, I think it's quite possible. He is now dead, of course, having died in Northampton Asylum. Alice has tried to cut her throat, and as a consequence cannot speak except in a whisper. And so the House Committee, who visit the asylum, who are just like the Board of Visitors, who visit prison. So, you know, another but huge similarity there. They have given her a notebook and a pen. And so when we hear from Alice, we're hearing extracts from her notebook. So I'm just going to read one of those. It's a little way into the story, actually, but let us talk a bit about paper and pen. So Alice Semple's notebook. John Clare. 3 farthings for a sheet of paper, shop paper of all colours, old copybooks, and never without scattered notes and sixpenny romances, could recite the Psalms and the poems of Job. Everyone was fond of the wildflowers, of daisies, our firsts, and of nightingales, who loved the pasture with its rushes and thistles, the wild marshy fen, the henshaw, and a melancholy sky. Always a fossil stone in his pocket. Because he is gone and I am old does not mean I do not crave him still, crave such love. Either that or to be gone from this place and all my sorrows winging above me. They hide us away like knives in a locked drawer, sequester us in their cellars and their padded cells. We are trapped in iron like the creatures of Keeper's Wood. A week now since the commotion, and Phoebe Baines is abed still, upstairs, strapped in like an animal, caged to be fed and plumped like a Christmas goose, made to eat beef until it lodges in the windpipe and takes her breath. And if the spoon do not work, head on the pillow, tube in the nose, port wine, brandy, eggs, food, fit for a queen, ha, 'tis the moral treatment, gag, funnel, tube, it will kill, slow but sure. If she is mad, if I be mad, then so be you. Be quiet, they say, be silent, stay out of the light, you know too much, travel too far. I would rather be out in the fields, digging the earth. I would rather tether a goat, ride a horse, plant for the good. Instead, they wish me to take up a needle and sew. Though it is forbidden, for no rogue sheets are allowed, I have torn a page from this notebook, and on it I have written what I know about the chief and poor Phoebe Baines. I have folded the paper and addressed it to Miss Vasey of the House Committee, and I intend to hand it to her myself. If they insist I must stay alive, then the cat will prowl among the pigeons, as do they. So that is a little taste of Alice Semple. I was going to read a final poem. Do I have time for that, Kate? Or
We have about 10 minutes left, so
okay. It won't take a minute. I'll just take 1 minute. Is that okay?
yeah,
I just want to read this because it kind of sums up how I feel about all these women. It's called Aztec Love Song for Women in Prison. I carry them to your house on my back, uprooted flowers. I am bent double with the weight of them, of women torn from the soil, their roots, mud, stem, and sepal crushed. I carry them. I carry their scent, the scent of ash and blood in my blood, bent double with the weight of their fragility, buds unopened, roses full blown, discarded, trampled on, I carry them. Their flower faces sit, geranium, harebell, meadowsweet in my classroom, foliage fluttering in the breeze from a barely open window. I carry the leaf of them, bent double with the weight of what we do to them, how we punish and incarcerate, condemn to iron, fallen blossom, uprooted flowers. I carry them on my back to your house. Okay, that's it, Kate. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Kate. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Avril. That was such an interesting talk, so insightful. It's been really great to hear from you. We've had some interesting questions come in. So Kathleen is asking, do you ever feel as though you're a spokesperson for those women telling the stories that they're not telling?
Absolutely, yes. Hi, Kathleen. It's nice to know you're there. Absolutely, yes. I think inevitably so. And it can feel like a huge burden in some ways. And I think that's why I had to hesitate for some time before I could write anything. And why I've kind of put it into other fiction, like sometimes a river song, because yeah, it's a huge responsibility, I guess. But yes, I do, but I don't perhaps think about it. I think writing Going In With Flowers somehow got that out of my system a bit. I feel I've said what I can say. I said what I wanted to say about women in prison publicly, to conferences and different things at the time. I was just before COVID, actually, and this is was quite sad for me. I was going to the Howard League for Penal Reform's conference in Oxford to read from Going In With Flowers and to talk about the continuing issue of what, whether that we shouldn't be locking women up. But sadly, that was cancelled because of COVID. But yes, is my answer, Kathleen. I think yes, but it doesn't feel like a burden. In a way, it feels like a privilege.
And we've had another interesting question from it's just the iPhone. I'm not sure who that is. In your experience, do you think experiences of abuse stifles creativity?
That wasn't my experience. I think my experience was more that the creative arts and the opportunity for creativity was really I mean, I don't want to use transformative again because that's probably a bit over the top, but was so helpful and important to women who had suffered abuse. And I feel that creativity, I think the creativity, it just needs the opportunity. I mean, I say for many women in prison, they would never have had the opportunity to write, to sing, to whatever. And one of the greatest, best things you do in a prison is to get groups in to offer writing, like the writer in residence did, or music groups, or that you plays, theatre. No, I think maybe it does to begin with, but you only have to have the right practitioners to open it up, because everybody is as creative, essentially as the next person.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers.
I think we have time just for one more quick question from Anna. Do you feel with this new book that you are coming at the prison slant again, as you did with the poems? Is your decision to use a different country and time entirely part of that thinking?
Yes. I think definitely. I didn't think that when I began it. I had a character that had come out of another story who fascinated me. It was Alice, actually. And I thought I was going to write something else about her. And then I began to write this. And it's as though I can't you know, 25 years is a long time to work in that environment, I suppose. And it's as though I can't get beyond it in my writing, but yes, I'm definitely coming at it slant. But I think it's using more of my prison experience than, say, Sometimes a River Song did, because, you know, setting that in a different country in a different time really helped. And I felt it was quite far from the prison, even though Ayana is very much like one of the women in prison. I've come closer again in the asylum, but yes, history gives me that distance, you know, that yeah, that I need. And I think, you know, it's fictional, and good fiction has a way, well, if it's good, I hope it is, of getting at the truth. You don't have to tell the truth straight on. You know, you can go at it slant, and I think that's what I'm doing now. I think Anna is right.
Great. Thank you so much, Avril, for speaking with us, and thank you everyone for submitting your questions. It's been a really fantastic evening. Please keep an eye on our social media and Eventbrite page, as we'll be running these events on a monthly basis with a variety of our authors at Linen Press. And if anyone is interested in purchasing one of Avril's books, please may I kindly ask you to do so through the Linen Press online shop that I have pasted into the chat. You know, websites like Amazon and similar websites take a big chunk from our profits. So if you can, that website would be great. But yeah, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Avril. It's been a great evening.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you to everyone? And can I just say, Joanne, yes, Pat Carlin, yes. I was reading Pat Carlin in those days and was very much, you know, encouraged by that. Sorry, just saw it there in the chat. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Bye. Have a good time.
Thank you. Bye.